The Ukrainian armed forces are also successfully striking military targets on the territory of the Russian Federation. And yesterday there was news that is still being discussed. For the first time, the General Staff confirmed the use of ATACMS missile systems on the territory of the Russian Federation. This has never happened before. If it had been used before, now you'll share the details you know, there was complete silence about it and it wasn't discussed. Then here the question arises whether was it a political decision made by the United States of America, or was it that a truly important target in Voronezh was hit? Why now, and why have we decided to speak about this publicly?
I think the time has come when it was necessary to acknowledge such a strike on Russian territory with Western weaponry. I believe this is an achievement of the diplomatic work of our representatives who are working systematically with the US, with European countries. This is also the result of months of negotiations and the fact that we have reached an agreement on the use of Western long-range weapons on Russian territory. If we remember, at one time we were allowed to strike at the frontline territories when we were dealing with the border frontline territories of the Russian Federation. This also happened during the Kursk operation. And now we understand that an agreement has been reached on the use of Western weapons to strike deeper into Russia. And this is a good signal for us because this is high-quality weaponry that we have learned to use quite effectively to strike Russian energy facilities. And
what is the range of these missile systems? Could you please remind us, and have they been improved? How far can they fly?
ATACMS can fly a distance of about 350 kilometers, according to various estimates. And these are longer range, so we need to understand and draw conclusions from the amount of territory and the range that these missiles can actually reach. Accordingly, we should look at Voronezh and as a result understand what weapons we currently have at our disposal and how far they are capable of reaching.
Mr. Andriy, speaking of modernization, the US State Department has approved a potential sale to Ukraine of a Patriot modernization package worth $105 million. This is about protecting our skies. In general, when it comes to modernizing such systems, how long does the technical process take? And during this modernization, does any of the Patriot batteries become non-operational? To what extent can this process, let's say, for a month or a month and a half, make one Patriot battery unable to fire as it's being modernized?
Well, we don't really know. You and I definitely can't say for sure whether this is the use of the batteries we already have. Perhaps it's about using batteries that will be provided to us through new packages and new support. At the very least, it would be good to have, understand, and know such information. Specifically, there is no confirmation as to which system we will be modernizing, whether it will be an existing system or a new one that will be provided, because let me remind you, thank you. At the moment, there have been statements about the delivery of new systems to Ukraine during this and the following years. Accordingly, there have already been new arrivals as well as promises regarding new systems that are supposed to be delivered to us. And accordingly, the question here is that we need to understand that it's not necessarily a system that is already on Ukrainian territory. I won't tell you the timeline for modernization, and even if I did know, I probably wouldn't say because this is sensitive information. There's no need to specify the exact number of days or months, since for the enemy, this information could be useful to understand whether a particular system has actually been withdrawn or not. And accordingly, I think that such news is also positive for us, since it means greater effectiveness. Better effectiveness of such systems will help us protect our critical infrastructure more effectively.
Mr. Andriy, as we wrap up our discussion about the protection of our skies, and this is especially relevant today when missiles and Shaheds are flying toward Western Ukraine, the question, has been around since the beginning of autumn, that the Rheinmetall Corporation has supposedly agreed to transfer new Skyranger air defense systems to Ukraine. 35. This is also a contract that is worth well over $100 million. What kind of system is it exactly? How effective is this system in practice? And what is it specifically effective against? Can you elaborate on its main features and intended purpose?
Unfortunately, I'm not ready to provide such a detailed answer regarding this system. However, there is one key advantage to what is happening now on the market and what is happening with us and our partner. The fact is that we have stopped begging, with an outstretched hand for the same systems, stopped working in only one direction, and have started to expand our opportunities as much as possible to obtain different types of weaponry in order to defend our skies and make use of our partners' capabilities. And even the latest trip, which is currently happening right now with our delegation, once again repeatedly confirms and demonstrates that we are actively expanding and developing various different methods and approaches of combat. With the enemy, for example, as Deputy Head of the President's Office Pavlo Palisa reported regarding the details of the trip to France, he explains that in addition to the Rafales, which we will receive from France over the course of 10 years of procurement, there were agreements reached for the supply of new radars for the SAMP-T systems, as well as the supply of new radars for other air and anti-air defense systems. Accordingly, this indicates that we are expanding our capabilities in absolutely all possible directions in order to ensure Ukraine's defense today.
And indeed, new words are already entering the vocabulary of Ukrainians, military weaponry terms. As you mentioned, during the President's European tour, 100 Rafale fighter jets are to be produced by France and Ukraine and delivered to us for air defense. This was decided by Zelensky on Sunday. First to Greece, then to France, and then to Spain. There, defense contracts are being signed, as you mentioned, including one in France. And the video is striking, something we've seen before from frontline cities. But what we're seeing now are the nets. Can you show it again? I wasn't planning to show it now, but we can because it's related. This is Kherson. Here's Blue Kherson. That's what it's like. A drive through this city, the street is covered with nets. And in this way, civilians are protected from drones because the Russians are specifically targeting civilians. Such nets are also in Zaporizhzhia and they are in Donetsk region as well. And during his trip to France, Zelensky even met with French fishermen and thanked them for providing these nets, because we actually don't have enough to cover such a large area in order to protect the civilians who remain there. But if we talk about this kind of measure, it's not high-tech, it's not like what we're discussing now, like fighter jets, but it's something that works right now. And with the onset of cold weather, with the arrival of snow, won't this kind of measure become ineffective? What do you think? What could you say about such a creative technology, though not highly sophisticated, so to speak?
Unfortunately, this is what we have today. Unfortunately, this is the reality we live in, and we have to use absolutely every available method, and in winter they will be just as effective. This is a matter of protection against FPV drones, not against large-scale weapons or means of destruction, but against small types of drones that unfortunately are already penetrating city areas. And indeed, as you said, the Russians are hunting civilians. There are no rules of war, no rules of conduct. Barbarians who simply hunt civilians, create chaos in cities, and terrorize our population. And such nets are indeed effective. They allow you to intercept such drones, which get tangled in the nets and can detonate right inside the net itself. But in fact, nothing will change during the winter. This net, which was effective, will remain so. And in reality, such things genuinely need to be used. There is truly no need to fear or reject them. As you can see, the fallen leaves hanging on these nets clearly show that these stretched nets are able to withstand different weights. Accordingly, a small FPV drone, which doesn't weigh much, gets tangled in such nets and again detonates there instead of hitting its target.
Now I want to move from Kherson to Donetsk region. There, the occupation authorities have declared a state of emergency due to strikes on the Zuivska and Starobyshev thermal power plants. So Donetsk region is in blackout, and besides being a problem for the civilian population, in your opinion, will this have any impact on the military at all, or not? It seems this isn't the first blackout in Donetsk region.
Obviously, it will have an impact. It will affect logistics and the Russians' capabilities. Why does it affect logistics? Because it takes the power grid out of operation. As we can see from our own example, it seriously affects the railway. The railway becomes much less efficient and can even come to a halt. The Russians make extensive and effective use of the railway for logistical needs, for moving their personnel, ammunition, and various types of weaponry. Then there is the use of enterprises that the Russians are currently utilizing in Donetsk region for military purposes. This includes the Juanev laboratories as well as enterprises that others are used for preparing weaponry, as well as the direct capabilities of the Russian military themselves where they are stationed. That is, all these factors significantly affect the logistics themselves and the work and activities of the occupying forces. In addition, this exacerbates the social situation in cities that are already left without water and now also without electricity. And as you can see, the occupiers are not very effective at restoring these processes, at repairing the power grid, or at re-establishing the water supply. And this will seriously incite people to social unrest.
But for some reason, they have become very active on the front line because, as the military reports, the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad agglomeration, Dnipropetrovsk region, and the Zaporizhzhia direction are all under pressure. Everything there is under Russian pressure. And somehow, all at once, they started crawling like cockroaches. These are the words our soldiers are telling us. Why all at once, and why right now at this very moment? Was this planned specifically in connection perhaps with diplomatic, what do you think, in your opinion, with diplomatic negotiations? Or were they preparing specifically for worsening weather to push further under the cover of fog towards Pokrovsky, towards Zaporizhzhia? Because this isn't happening only near Pokrovsky. How do you explain it to yourself?
It can be explained by the fact that they actually waited for the situation to escalate near Pokrovsky and the Ronograd agglomeration. And in order to stretch our defense forces, they began to intensify other offensive actions. You can see that right now there are several directions where the Russians are really quite effective. And they are advancing very quickly. These are the Zaporizhzhia direction and the Pokrovsky-Mirnohrad direction. The enemy waited for the moment when they could penetrate the Pokrovsky-Mirnohrad agglomeration and put pressure on it. And accordingly, at that moment, they activated other sections of the front in order to stretch our defense forces and prevent us from concentrating our defense on the Pokrovsky-Mirnohrad agglomeration. That is, they used this moment precisely in order to saturate the front as much as possible and put pressure on our units, on our defense forces.
Mr. Andriy, we don't have much time left, so we want to ask you some brief questions and hear brief answers from you. The publication Axios, citing its sources, claims that the Trump administration is secretly developing a plan with Russia to end the war in Ukraine. In your opinion, is this just a rumor, or is there really no smoke without fire, as they say?
I think this news shouldn't surprise us, even if it is true. We have repeatedly seen Trump make efforts, whether with us or without us, to discuss peace processes in some way. He carries these ideas with him. They are extremely important to him. And the very fact that, against the backdrop of the processes currently taking place in Ukraine, there is this kind of informational buzz about supposed negotiations between the United States is noteworthy. About this so-called peace plan indicate that perhaps Trump wants to make use of all his capabilities and the political situation in Ukraine as quickly as possible in order to push Ukraine toward the negotiation process. But it's not for nothing that politicians are being sent to Turkey today by the president to revive these negotiations, meaning we are not rejecting or shying away from them either. I think that process will not happen without us.
Thank you very much.